Lena Walker had learned early how to disappear without ever leaving the room. In her family, silence was expected of daughters. Obedience was praised, questions were frowned upon, and affection was something you earned, not something you were given freely. Her father, Charles, was a retired military man who ran the house like a low-rank base, disciplined, rigid, and built on a clear hierarchy where men stood tall and women folded in. Her mother, Joanne, moved through each day like she was always bracing for bad weather. And Lena's older brother, Caleb, sat on the throne of casual entitlement, knowing no matter what he did, he'd always be the one called "my boy" with pride. Lena wasn't close to any of them. She learned to listen more than she spoke. She cleaned up after herself. She brought home good grades and small victories that were rarely acknowledged. But none of that mattered when Grandma Rose was around. Every Saturday since Lena was old enough to ride a bike, she'd spend the day at Grandma Rose's white clapboard house 2 streets over. It wasn't far, but stepping inside felt like entering another world, one with quilts on the chairs, wind chimes in the windows, and a kitchen that always smelled like something warm and real. Her grandmother had once been a high school teacher, the kind who corrected grammar without apology and didn't flinch at the truth. Rose had outlived a husband who hadn't deserved her and raised 3 sons who didn't listen enough. But with Lena, she was different. Softer in the ways that mattered. "You're the only one in this family who hears things," she used to say. "Don't let them make you feel like that's a weakness." They'd talk for hours. About books, about people, about life. Rose encouraged Lena to read beyond her textbooks, to think beyond her surroundings. She never belittled her dreams or asked when she was going to get a boyfriend. She just listened, taught, and quietly passed along a legacy Lena didn't even know she was inheriting. So when Lena called her grandmother one Thursday after class and didn't get an answer, it unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She called again. No reply. She texted. Nothing. It wasn't like Grandma Rose to ignore her. Something felt off. She called home next. Her mother said vaguely, "Oh, I think your grandma's been under the weather. Your dad's been checking in. Can I talk to her? She's resting right now." That was it. No follow-up. No offer to pass on a message. Lena waited another day, then another. She told herself not to overreact. Her family wasn't the kind to make a big deal out of anything emotional. Maybe Grandma was just tired. Maybe the flu. Maybe a fall. It wasn't until a full week had passed that Lena took a weekend bus home, a knot of worry forming in her chest. She knew something was wrong the moment she stepped into the house. Her mother looked startled to see her. Her father didn't even get up from the recliner. On the mantel, next to a flickering candle and a vase of wilting flowers, was a photo of Grandma Rose. Lena's heart stopped. "What is this?" she asked, voice shaking. Her mother looked at the floor. Her father finally spoke. "She passed last week." Lena stared at them. "Last week? You didn't tell me." "She didn't suffer," her mother said softly. "There was a funeral," her father added. "It's done now." "You buried her?" Lena's voice cracked. "You had a funeral and didn't tell me." Her father's face hardened. "It wasn't a conversation for you. These things, these decisions, are for the men of the family to handle. Don't make this about you." Lena turned to her mother. "You knew how close we were. You knew she wanted me there." Her mother still wouldn't look at her. "We thought you were busy with school." Her brother Caleb walked in from the kitchen then, carrying a soda, casual as ever. "We figured you had exams or something. didn't want to stress you." Lena couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the ceiling too low. She stepped back, hands trembling. She was my person. She was the only one who. She was your grandmother, her father cut in. And now she's gone. We did what needed to be done. Lena left that night. She packed a small bag and got back on the same bus. She sat by the window and cried into the sleeve of her hoodie, not because her grandmother had died, but because her goodbye had been stolen. There had been no hand to hold, no last words, no closure. Just silence. Just erasure. Back at school, she went through the motions. Classes, work, study, repeat. She told her professors she needed an extension, that someone close had passed. But she didn't tell them the rest. She didn't say, "They buried her without me." Who would believe that? Who would understand? At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every Saturday she'd spent in that White House, wondering how someone so loved could be forgotten so easily by the people she'd raised. Lena started skipping meals. Her grades slipped. She stopped texting back friends who asked if she was okay. She wasn't. But no one really wanted the truth. She finally took a leave of absence halfway through the semester. Told the dean she needed time. Moved into a tiny studio apartment above a closed florist shop, barely big enough for a bed and a folding chair. She took a job shelving books at the town library, quiet work, low stakes. It was the first time she'd ever lived without her family's voices in the next room. At first, the silence felt unbearable. Then it felt like freedom. Weeks passed. Then months. One afternoon, she walked past a farmer's market and saw a familiar figure hunched over a basket of peaches. It was Isabel, her grandmother's youngest sister. Lena hadn't seen her in years. "Lena," the woman said, turning. Her eyes widened. "Oh, honey." They sat on a bench nearby, paper cups of lemonade in hand, the air thick with everything unspoken. Isabel held Lena's hand and asked, "Did you ever get the letter?" "What letter?" Isabel sighed. "Rose left instructions. She asked that you be called. She wanted you to read something. She gave it to your father. Said it was for your hands only." Lena shook her head. "They never told me. I didn't even know she was sick." Isabel reached into her bag. "Then I think this was meant for you." She handed Lena a small box, familiar, wooden, hand-carved with tiny roses along the sides. Lena opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a worn photograph of her and Grandma Rose on the porch, laughing, flower on both their faces. Beneath it, folded neatly, was a bundle of yellowed pages tied with twine. At the top, in her grandmother's handwriting, "For Lena. If you're reading this, it means they chose silence. But I know you'll hear me anyway. You always did." Lena closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt something real. Not rage. Not grief. Just a heartbeat, steady, stubborn, and her own. Lena read the letter that night, curled under a thrifted blanket in her small apartment with only the hum of the refrigerator to keep her company. The pages were worn, some stained at the edges, others with tiny folds like they'd been read and reread 100 times. Her grandmother's handwriting looped carefully across each line, steady even in its age. She wrote about the family, the way they favored the boys, the way they clipped the wings of the girls and called it tradition. She wrote about her own regrets, how she had kept quiet when she should have roared, how she'd wanted better for Lena but didn't know if she'd run out of time. And then there was the last page. A short, simple line. They'll forget to tell you you're enough. So I'm writing it down, you are. You always were. Lena sat with that sentence for hours. She didn't cry. Not like she expected to. What came instead was something quieter and deeper, like air finally filling a room that had been locked shut for too long. She started carrying the letter in her bag, folded and tucked into a notebook she kept in her backpack. On her loneliest days, she'd reach for it, not to read it again, but just to feel its weight. The apartment was small, the walls thin, and the pipes made strange sounds at night. She didn't have much: a folding table, a chair with a cracked leg, 2 chipped mugs, and a mattress on the floor. But she had peace. No footsteps stomping upstairs. No sideways comments. No one reminding her she wasn't enough. Just her. Her breath. Her work. Her grandmother's voice folded between pages. She returned to work at the library. Quiet hours among quiet shelves. She found comfort in the organization of it all, books lined up like they mattered, like someone cared where they belonged. She spent her breaks reading books on women's history, family systems, generational silence. It felt like breathing into her own life from the outside. When her old college advisor reached out about re-enrolling, she hesitated. But then she thought of Rose, of the way she'd clap her hands together whenever Lena finished a thought, proud like it was a medal. So she returned to school, part-time. She chose to study history, not because she wanted to look backward, but because she wanted to understand how people survived being forgotten. At night, she wrote. Not for anyone else, just for herself. Memories of baking with her grandmother. Fragments of things her father said that she'd buried under obedience. Words she was only now learning how to say out loud. One afternoon, after class, she walked past her grandmother's house. It was no longer hers. Her father had sold it to a couple with 2 golden retrievers and a wreath on the door. The porch was freshly painted, the garden trimmed. The lavender bush was gone. She stood across the street for a long time. Not crying. Not angry. Just acknowledging. Then she walked away. Weeks later, she ran into Isabel again, this time at the back of a local museum, where Lena had applied for a part-time position cataloging oral histories. Isabel hugged her like she still saw the child in her, and said she would be proud. You know that, right? Lena nodded. I know. It took longer than she thought to start sleeping through the night again. Some weeks, she'd wake up gasping, unsure why. Other times, she'd find herself staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the exact sound of Rose's voice. Memory had a way of muting even the most familiar things. One evening, while filing old archives at the museum, Lena found a collection of letters written by women during the war, mothers, daughters, wives. Each letter was tagged, scanned, and filed away, tucked into folders that no one had opened in decades. She read them slowly, reverently. And she thought, they kept writing, even when no one answered. So she kept writing too. Not letters, but essays. Thoughts. Pieces of the silence she'd lived inside for so long. She wrote about invisible daughters and loud silence. About what it meant to love someone who the world forgets. She didn't know where it would go. She just knew it had to live somewhere outside of her body. Her mother called once. It was short. Awkward. A weather report in disguise. Your father's health isn't great, she said. He doesn't say it, but he's been asking about you. Lena listened. Let the silence sit. Do you want to talk to him? Her mother asked. No, she said gently. Not right now. She didn't explain. She didn't owe that anymore. She hung up and stood by the window, watching a bird hop along the power line. It flew away a moment later, wings wide, sure of their place in the sky. By the time Lena turned 26, her life had grown quiet in the best ways. She had a job at the city's Historical Archives Center, where she worked digitizing family records, interviewing elderly residents, and piecing together the stories that might otherwise vanish. She rented a small apartment with slanted ceilings and a crooked balcony railing that creaked when the wind blew. She planted herbs in cracked ceramic pots and wrote essays in the evening, some of which were published in small journals that paid her in copies and gratitude. She didn't talk to her family often. Her mother called every few months with updates dressed up as concern. Her father never picked up the phone. And Caleb, well, he had a wife now and a baby boy. Lena only knew because someone tagged her in a photo she hadn't been invited to take. She didn't expect anything anymore. And maybe that was the peace she'd fought for without knowing it. The thesis she'd written 2 years earlier, The Erasure of Women in Domestic Memory, a personal and archival inquiry, had been passed around quietly by professors who rarely praised anything out loud. It didn't win awards, but it found readers. Other women wrote to her. Strangers. Daughters. People who had been left out of funerals, out of wills, out of rooms where their names should have been spoken. Lena read every message. She didn't answer all of them. But she folded their voices into hers and carried them. One morning in early spring, she got a call from her mother. She almost didn't answer. Her voice was thinner this time. "It's your father. He had a stroke." Lena didn't reply. "He's in the hospital," her mother continued. "I thought you should know." She didn't say come home. She didn't say he wants to see you. But Lena heard it anyway. That old weight in her chest. The one that never really disappeared. That still echoed with sentences like, "This isn't for girls," and "You wouldn't understand." She packed a bag. Not because she was ready. Not because it was owed. Just because something inside her needed to look him in the eyes one last time, not to find answers, but to prove to herself she didn't need any. The hospital room smelled like bleach and paper towels. Her father lay there, thinner than she remembered, face slack, eyes flickering toward her with no real recognition. Her mother sat beside him, hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl. No one spoke for a while. "You came," her mother said. Lena nodded. She looked at her father, the man who had decided she wasn't worthy of goodbye, the man who gave her silence when she asked for love. He blinked slowly. Opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lena stepped closer. "You don't have to say anything." He didn't. Her mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "Your grandmother's ring," she said. "She wanted you to have it." Lena took it. It was silver, worn, a small blue stone set in the middle. She remembered it from Saturdays at the porch table, from hands that folded dough and turned pages. She slipped it on. It fit perfectly. "I'm not angry anymore," Lena said. "But that doesn't mean I forget." Her mother didn't meet her eyes. "I know," she said. Later that afternoon, Lena left the hospital and walked to the cemetery alone. It was her first time visiting the grave. The stone was simple, Rose Walker, 1939 to 2020. Beloved mother and grandmother. No mention of who she really was. No room for the woman who carried Lena's voice when no one else wanted to hear it. She sat beside the grave for a long time. The grass was soft beneath her, the wind gentle against her neck. She pulled out the notebook from her bag, the one that still carried the folded letter in the back pocket. She opened to a blank page and began reading out loud from her own writing, words about remembrance, about small resistances, about daughters who remember when no one else does. When she finished, she placed a sprig of rosemary at the headstone, pressed her palm against the cold stone, and whispered, "They never gave me a seat. But I learned how to build my own table." She stood. The sun had begun to set, coloring the sky in deep gold and violet. As she walked away, she didn't look back. There was nothing left behind her that she needed. What she carried now was more than memory. It was inheritance. Not of things or names, but of voice. Of knowing who you are when no one hands it to you. She wasn't someone's missing daughter anymore. She was her grandmother's legacy. And she was finally, fully, hers.